And then
it was going to the cloud.
Oh, we don't want that. That just is annoying and stupid. Hello, people. It's going to be a ranty episode, I think.
Yeah, so just for context, for context for everyone else, there was a Building a Second Brain Summit that happened last week, which I attended almost all of the sessions. There were a couple of sessions where I left a little bit early because of real life things, and some of the presentations were mildly irritating. So I prefer to watch them on the replay at double speed because they were a little bit slow for me. And if you do want to watch the replays, I believe they're putting all of the sessions up on the Tiago Forte YouTube channel. I'm not sure when, but they will probably be out at some point for you to watch at double speed because some of them are a bit slow. But what I will say is some of the presentations, the chat had some really good points, which I put in my notes in Obsidian Publish. Maybe we can link to that in the notes. But there are a couple of sessions that John and I were just talking about, and we wanted to have a share our own thoughts.
Yes, and for full transparency, I have not watched it. I haven't watched it. And we'll leave that there. I didn't watch anything. I have just been going through the notes from Danny and just having the conversation. So yes, there may be some context missing from what I'm saying, but I'm sure Danny will probably fill it in if I've missed something.
Yeah, I can certainly do that. And what I want to say on top of that is, this is where I think the notes from the presentation become useful, because we all take notes slightly differently. And I was hearing this while I was sharing. So some people that were following my notes on Twitter were actually saying, oh, it's interesting that you took those notes. I interpreted it in this way. So even though John's read my notes, it still triggered a conversation, which is kind of like the point of the conference. The conference isn't to say, here's all the answers. It's to say, okay, here's some stuff that I know. Well, this is what it should be anyway. Here's the stuff that I know. Let's have a conversation about that, whether we could do it this way or that way, which is what this conversation is going to be about.
Yeah. So I don't want to start at the top, because that's not how I work. It's because quite literally my rant has to happen right now. And it was relating to systems, and how systems have to start being simple, and you have to build up your systems. Systems already exist. They are not something that you create externally. A system you externalize is from your own brain, which you turn into a physical thing. A system exists. Systems run our world. They just happen. It is kind of erring on the side of chaos theory, which I haven't explored quite enough yet to make it any educated conversations about. But like, systems already exist. Every single thing you do is a system. When I wake up in the morning, there is a system of me coming downstairs, making myself a nice, lovely cup of tea, and coming out here to start working. That is a system. It's what we do. It's a series of steps that I take every single day to come out here to work. What is happening here, and what happens, not necessarily just with Nick, but with the whole productivity and systems thinking space, is we're trying to do it. Like, we're thinking and using systems as an external thing that we have to fit into. That is fundamentally broken, because we cannot, what we try to build is a perfect system of, well, this person says I have to use this, so I have to use, pillars, pipelines, and vaults. I have to use, I use the damn system, can't remember it. Projects, areas, resources, and archives. I have to use those. They are what I have to do. I have to fit myself into these methodologies and workflows and systems, because that's what they use. And the truth is that's thinking about it in the freaking wrong way. It's just the wrong way.
So I want to be I want to bring some clarity to the words very quickly. So systems is used in two different ways in the productivity space. Systems through a systems theory lens, i.e. what systems theory is, which is what you spoke about, and then systems as in procedures like SOPs and habits and things. And I think there is a confusion between a system as this is what we do, step 1, 2, 3, 4 procedures systems, and systems as in this is systems theory. This is an environment that we do this thing in. This living organism is in this system, i.e. all the objects, all the people, all the feelings, emotions, and the rest of it, the impact that impact the system, the environmental system, rather than the procedure 1, 2, 3, 4. And this is where I think either we need to be more we need to be more explicit about how we're talking about these systems, or we need to understand what we're talking about before we start talking about it, or at least acknowledge that we potentially don't know enough, which we're all in that. Exactly.
Yeah, and I think that's a very good point. The processes and the systems, they are different. Processes you can create, but honestly, quite frankly, I don't think you need to create them, because once you know how you do things, you can put them together and it's not as complicated as we make it out to be, as most of the productivity space make it out to be, because we're trying to make it perfect. And what happens, a common thing that I find when I'm working with clients on this, is they're trying to organize while they're doing it. They're trying to fix everything at once, which is a recipe for flipping disaster. And 2, they're trying to lay out their processes, to use the correct term, but trying to make their processes better before actually listing them out, which I think is a huge mistake, because depending on the theory and how you believe, and Danny will correct me, our brains can't do both at the same time very easily.
You didn't need the last bit.
Good.
Your brain can only have attention on a certain amount of things, arguable as to how much and what and where and why. But yeah, it can't multitask. It's not possible.
And what happens is we try to multitask and we try to just write down our processes. What we do is we go, oh, well, this person says I should use it this way, and this. Well, let's work out how should I write my processes first. And the idea is that we're trying to organize our processes before we've actually written them out and got them out of our heads, which is what.
Yeah. So what I'll add to that is essentially this is how we process, and there isn't a defined way. There isn't an actual proven way of how we process stuff. So bear that in mind when I say this. But the idea is currently is there is serial processing, parallel processing, and cascade processing when we are processing information, depending on the brain damage and the issues that we have in our minds. Each one's going to be slightly individual. It will change how we process. So parallel processing is as close as we're going to get to multitasking, which means we have to have a full grasp of the different independent objects or things or concepts that we are talking about and putting those together. So when we read a word, we have a grasp of what all of those letters mean together. That is parallel processing, top-down processing, if you want to go in like orders. But when we don't have a full grasp of whatever the concept, the topic is, then it's serial processing. We go from this to that, to that, to that, etc., which is what most people need to do when they have novel information or they're trying something new, because they haven't got the prior knowledge to build up on schema theory, to build up on, so they're doing it one after the other, which is why you can't multitask. It's something new.
Yeah, and especially in this kind of what we're discussing here, this is, so what happens is with this serial processing, yes?
One after the other.
Yeah, I think thinking. With serial processing, it's quite literally, we're like, okay, so I'm going to write this word down. Oh, I need to make this better. Let's go make this better. So it's like moving, instead of actually just following the line, we are moving and trying to create new lines and kind of alternate realities where we literally just get nothing done. And then we wonder why we feel flipping overwhelmed, because we're trying to process all of it. And then it's like layers and layers upon layers upon layers going up and up and up and up and up. And we're just stuck, not finishing anything.
And what you can relate to that is then obviously cognitive load theory, which we've spoken about before, because there are so many things now, because it's all new. There's so many novel pieces of information, whether that is completely new to you or a new way of looking at an old thing, that your brain can't hold it all, which neurodivergence, you may have a lower capacity, however that's measured or defined. I'm not a fan of that, but hey ho. No. But you may not be able to remember in that period of time the amount of information you want to be processing, so you forget things or you choose not to look at new things, which is obviously going to impact what you're working on at the time.
Yeah. And I think this goes back to the issue that I have with so much of the productivity space and the way it's being described. It's missing all of this context that we are discussing here.
So on that point, I don't think I raised it. So I've made a video on the third channel of mine, Learning to Learn, about approaches to human cognition. It hasn't been published yet, but the reason I bring this up is approaches to human cognition is how we study cognition, how we study the mind. And in almost every single approach, every different way we try and measure cognition, measure the mind, you can always end it with, this is oversimplified. So we try and model the brain, but it's oversimplified because it doesn't account for that nuance, that context, this environment, that individual. And I think that is what we try and do in the productivity space. We try and oversimplify it so we miss out context, we miss out nuances. And yes, that can be useful for marketing and for business, but for actual use cases, not so much when you look at an individual basis, which is just human nature. We like to oversimplify things so we can understand them or have a grasp of them. But if you do have a grasp of that basic oversimplified thing, you may be missing out the big friction point you have in the room, which you may come to in like a month or two's time. And that's where I see a lot of the confusion happening, because people have oversimplified it. They've got this summary in their head of what this thing is. Then they hear something else and you're like, what? I'm confused. And then friction point, because now they're thinking about everything at once.
And then there's that going outside of, just a little bit outside, but into the business world, is like, oh, well, you just set this up. You just do this. And once you've done that, then you can be successful. And once you've done, and there is that guilt that there is something wrong, that you are not enough, that there is a problem with you because you can't follow this set of, methodologies or processes that have been laid out by one single person with a lack of context. And I would not be surprised. Oh, I think Tiago actually tweeted this around thought leadership and things like that, around how his partner actually went and said, I don't really trust thought leaders anymore, seeing you behind the scenes. And that's, I think, the missing context that is never, ever shown. For me, I find that more fascinating and interesting. I show the missing context in everything that I do. And I think you're the same, Danny, is that we actually focus more on the hidden context than we do on the main stuff. It's like, go to them to get started, come to us when you're ready to actually be productive, because you cannot be productive following their methodologies on their own, because it's just, here is a plate of things, go do something with it.
Well, like I was saying, they are sharing their system with people, and it is a system in system theory mind. It is their system because it is their context, their nuances, their environment. But as soon as you say, okay, this is my system, now you can go use it, well, now it's not possible because they have a different environment, they have different factors. And this is what I was saying in my Zettelkasten video about the science behind Zettelkasten. His system worked for him, but the Zettelkasten itself doesn't work for us because we have varying differences in our environment. We have technology. He didn't have the technology we have. So you couldn't, I don't think he would be able to use Zettelkasten in the world that we live in now, because when you look at the multimedia types of content, how are you going to put a video link in a card? You can't. How are you going to put an image or an infographic on a card? You're not. So the environment that he was in is different to the environment we are now in. So Zettelkasten is impossible, in my eyes, to do now. We can still use systems theory to educate and justify our note-taking system, not Zettelkasten, but they're different things. And that's his system in his environment, doesn't work for me in my environment, my system.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. Often what is viewed from the outside world is that a system is, you copy someone else's and then that's it. It's like you become successful, you force yourself into someone else's system. But the thing is that your system actually has to revolve around you. You are the one using it. That is the missing piece, the missing kind of context that no one fully understands when you first get started, or is never spoken about. Because it's not easy to market, believe me, I know. It's not easy to market that, because it basically says, well, we don't actually know what the right system is.
So you might giggle at this, but what I'm thinking of is a phrase. you can't template a system.
Yeah.
And I think because people are buying templates, whether that's a Notion template, whether that's an Obsidian template or a Roam template or just a framework template, it's not a system. It's a template. They are different things. Maybe that should be on your podcast. Like, templates are not systems, or systems are not templates. Either way works. But yeah, you can't template a system because environments are drastically different. The app may be the same,
yeah,
but the environment's not.
Yeah, and that's actually a good thing to say, is that an app is not the kind of context or the outside. It's not the environment. The app is not the environment. It's part of the environment, but is a tiny insignificant part of the environment. The biggest part of the environment that you need to pay attention to is you. That is how you become productive, and not in the ways that were promoted probably throughout the entire Building a Second Brain summit of just do this. Oh, it will be hard. Yes, I get that it will be hard, but you're not explaining how to make the hard part easier. Just saying it's hard. There's a thing here. Upfront work will be hard. Great. Well, then that means for a lot of people who are ADHD, and I think I was actually mentioned later on.
You're looking at my notes.
I am, yeah.
You've got my notes up. So
how to make things fun to get it done. This is the thing. This is what frustrates me about the vast majority of productivity. It's upfront work will be always hard. Doing work, it's worth it. Yeah, if you can do that, if your brain will allow that. For many people, myself included, people with ADHD, people with other conditions, you cannot just sit at a desk going, oh yes, let me archive my folders. You can't. That's not, your body will physically stop you. This is not just necessarily for people who are neurodiverse on the, I won't call it positive, but on the, the scale where your brain works really fast and you think of lots of things and it feels more like a superpower. But there is also the other side.
That was discussed in the ADHD panel.
Yeah, I hate the super, but it's often viewed as that. The savant syndrome is what it is called.
Yeah.
And it's not always, it's barely a superpower.
That's what everyone on the panel said.
Yeah, it's not a superpower. It sucks. The only reason why people the reason why Notion is successful and the reason why Notion is so good, in my eyes, is because of the ability to make it how you want it to work. And if it doesn't work how you want it to work, then don't use it. I think that really upsets me. It's everyone's talking about just one app to use. I found Notion. Notion works for me. If it doesn't work for me, I won't use it anymore.
I assume that's why you started using Obsidian for some things.
Yeah, that's why I moved to Obsidian for some things. And oh gosh, I love it. I was doing some research for some work I was doing, and Obsidian let me completely pull together all of my thoughts fast. And there was no friction, which meant I got more done, which meant I learned more, which meant I connected more ideas. I loved it. It was just beautiful and seamless. It wasn't hard. I'm so sick and tired of everyone saying everything has to be hard.
I think what the conference was, the conference was obviously focused at those getting into knowledge management. It was very much directed at how we get started. Where do you get started? What potential apps may you want to go to? Obviously, you had Francesco talking about every app under the sun. Then you had the Evernote specialist, the OneNote specialist, the Logseq specialist, the Obsidian specialist, the Notion specialist. They were all there. But once you've got the app or whatever it is, there was very limited conversation going beyond that, which maybe, obviously this is the first conference, so it's a starting point. I think the further the conversation, moving those conversations on did happen. You had Chris Sparks talking about some things, Kehi talking about some things, but they were very much in their context, in their environments. And I think this is partly subject to the types of people that were talking, but they were all entrepreneurs. they were all speaking from one lens. There wasn't what I would class as a normal person's lens from the advanced stuff. Like, I'm an academic. I'm a business person ish, and I'm an entrepreneur. There we go, ish. Easy for me to say, ish. But I don't do the business stuff well. Anyone in business that has spoken to me knows I don't do the business stuff well. I don't sell myself well. It's not something I like doing. John can attest to that. But because my focus is research, I'm more of a knowledge management person than a business person. So when there are conversations about how do you choose what note to look at, that wasn't covered. So they tell you how to capture loads of notes and they tell you to process it, but they don't tell you, well, which note do you focus on? How do you prioritize it? How do you actually make those notes? Where do those notes go? How do you find those notes? Search was brought up so much in all the different tools. You're like, great. How do you optimize your notes for search? That wasn't mentioned. You just search for it. Okay, if you've got thousands of notes, how do you find the one you're actually looking for? If you're looking for something in specific, how do you actually find that note? Because if it's a generalized word, like for me, cognition, I type cognition into my Obsidian, I'm going to get basically half of my notes. How am I going to find something specific? How do you find those things? I would just search for it. Yeah, but how? What do I type in? How do I format my notes? How do I know where to find those things? That wasn't discussed. And that is where I think going beyond the business of, tasks, projects, and business meeting notes, actually going to thoughts, ideas, creative ideas. Where's that? And that's, I think, the conversation that was missing in the summit for me.
Yeah. And I think obviously a lot of the entrepreneurs in that space were on a huge level. They aren't small.
No.
They aren't your everyday Joe.
A lot of them are like 6-7 figure businesses.
Yeah, exactly. And I think what's lacking there, like from my side as the business person in the conversation, is this is all great, but most people don't give two shits in the business world, because what they really need is just to feel like they're doing the right things in the right way and just to get through their day, and be able to feel good at the end of it. And a lot of that is lacking in most conversations because it realms onto a different portal of thinking. And I think that bringing psychology to systems is going to help far more. Now, I know I said psychology, which is a fucking massive topic, but
Gonna say, are we talking cognitive psychology, ecological psychology, clinical psychology, sports psychology? I could go on.
I know you know what I mean in this context. Thank you.
Yeah.
But just bringing that like interpersonal, because business is personal, and when you reach a certain level, it becomes less personal, and that's fine. But it stems from where you start, the grassroots business. And I think what was missing from that panel, I'm looking at everyone, there wasn't a grassroots business there. There wasn't someone who, I am earning 5 figures, I am very good, but I'm not at that level of Marie Poulin and Tiago Forte. I'm not doing 6-7 figures. I'm doing 5. I'm happy with that. That's good. That's great. That's where I am. And that is often where the vast majority of business owners are.
I think the only people that are at that level were on the ADHD panel. You had Brian Jenks and Jesse Anderson, I think his last name is.
Yeah.
Those two. I think those two are the only, I say the only, I think they were the most, I'm going to say it, down to earth people. Like the Evernote lady was, I had never met her before. she might be a lovely person. She probably is, but she was talking, she is the Evernote expert, has a massive course for Evernote, essentially the Marie Paulin of Evernote. The OneNote guy was essentially the same thing. It's like the go-to person for the tool, which is great for a conference. But what about the normal everyday people? And something that got me thinking while you were talking was this is a perfect example from one of the summits. Nick Milo was asked to give him like people in chat asked him to give an example of how he uses his notes to link ideas together. And his response was, well, I don't really have one at the moment because my focus is on the linking your thinking business. So his note-taking of linking notes and ideas and thoughts were around his business, not around new ideas, generating ideas or creative thoughts or linking concepts together. It was about, how do I plan out the content for my business? Or how do I plan out the syllabus for the webinars, which is a business person, which is fine. That's his focus. But that was the same as every other person. The Evernote lady spoke about her Evernote course and her Evernote thing. And then the OneNote man's, again, same thing. Logseq person, same thing. Breedwise, same thing. They all spoke about their app and building their business in the app they were talking about, rather than fleeting notes and general ideas. Those shower thoughts weren't mentioned at all. Those, oh, does this link with that, weren't mentioned at all. Nick Milo's conversation was the closest, but still there wasn't a tangible example of how do I link cognitive load theory to neuroscience, to psychology, to how I get up every day. Like those concepts and ideas weren't spoken about at all. And that's how I see knowledge management, not just action management of this is how I grow a business. Yeah. My personal thoughts.
Yeah, and I agree. I think so much of that context is dropped. And I think that's sad, because then we go back to what I say every time. It's like, oh, well, so they're successful, so I need to manage my knowledge. Yeah. Okay, well, I'll just do what they do and then hope for the best. And then when it doesn't work, I feel like I failed and I've done something wrong. And this is obviously not the fault of the people at the summit. This is not a dig at any human being at the summit. It's the dig at the concepts themselves. It is a statement around, we need more conversations that aren't just about how to build your second brain. It's about how to use a second brain. I mean, I hate the concept anyway. It makes me cringe, but still, like how to use that. How to use extended cognition basically is what it is, and how to incorporate that into your life. Because often what is done is everything separated into business and life, which is great in a delicious, delightful, perfect way. But let's be real.
Simplified way.
Yeah.
A categorization in simplified way. But let's be real, carry on.
But let's be real, it's never that simple. It just isn't. Like business, unless you work in an office, unless you are at a point where you can go external and work somewhere else, which once you get to 6-7 figures, you may actually do, which is possibly what's happening there. Like I am in my shed. My kids are right behind 2 doors, and if they want my attention, they will goddamn get it. How do I make sure I don't lose? How do I link my thinking when I've got my little boy in here going, what are you doing? What are you doing? How do you link your thinking when the dog goes out nutso and you've got to try and stop them from barking? Like, these are the things that aren't discussed. The environment that is real and true. What if someone needs me, or my mum rings for something, like, so that everyone has, obviously I have a kid, 2 kids and a partner and all that. But if my mum rings me and an emergency happens and I'm still linking my thinking, what then? What does my system think about that? None of that is discussed. And it's so important because it's actual real life.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that is decision making. So a lot of the decision making that was spoken about is towards actions and projects and tasks and growing the business and leverage and this, that. Great. What about the everyday decisions? Like, I need to remember to clean my teeth. Those small things. Like, I have that on my task manager, but that wasn't shown or mentioned. I have the medication for my eye. That's on my task manager as well. Are they actions to leverage my bit? No, it's so that I can still see the screens. Like, I need to do that stuff. And something that Brenda, someone in my Discord, we've spoken about quite a lot. She has an issue with essentially energy fatigue. And the fatiguing state of some diseases really make it difficult to get yourself up. And it's not the get yourself up that's the struggle, it's all the other things that go along with it. So I did a vlog a couple of days ago about energy and stress and how play and practice can go backwards and forwards. And you may feel the environment is stressful to you. Again, I'm not going to talk about something I've already spoken about in the vlog, but basically, if you're in a stressful environment, it's not going to be fun and playful. It's no longer, oh yeah, let's do this thing. It's now, oh, do I really have to do this thing? And if it is that, well, how do you change it? Because you're now going from play to practice. Like they were saying in the conference, you want it to be fun and enjoyable. Well, what if it isn't? Then what?
Yeah. And to not repeat my own self, I actually have a podcast episode on what happens when you don't want to freaking do it. It's not about, as was said, and I'm just going to read the notes. What was it which drove me insane? I have to read it because it.
Half of the notes, I think.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Yeah, pretty much.
I feel offended, everyone. John started reading my notes and was like, oh my God, no, this is bad. No, wrong. I'm like, I'm just writing down what they were saying. Don't attack me.
It's okay, I found another one. Excuse to not start. It's like there's an excuse, as if you should just make yourself. It's like, that's not necessarily how it works. You're missing a lot of context and a lot of things. It's that feeling of just like, well, you just gotta keep doing it because it will be worth it in the end. It's like, yeah, I know that. It's not going to make me do it. Thanks. Don't. Yes.
I was going to say something that I found interesting that wasn't brought up was because they were speaking about behavior change, a lot of it. Like Atomic Habits, the book, wasn't brought up ever, which I thought, wow, what's going on? That book's normally like the go-to thing when people start talking about building habits. Yeah, exactly. But the model, like any model of behavior change, none of them were mentioned. I'm sitting here like, so we have over 60 models of behavior change in science, in academia. Granted, 40 of them are absolutely trash, but there are over 60, and none of them were brought up from my recollection. From in my notes, I don't remember, and I don't think many people talking about behavior change in general. It was just a lot of analogies that were very hard to grasp. What a lion and an antelope has got to do with leverage, I'm not sure, and what hydrogen and water has got to do with wetness is a bit interesting. But yeah, some interesting analogies were brought up. But the building a habits bit, the very first section of building a habit is obviously accepting that you need to build a habit. Like, you need to recognize, you need to make some sort of change, but how do you make that recognition? Self-awareness. Well, how do you gain self-awareness? None of that was spoken about. And those are the small things with making changes and making decisions based on your environment, your context, your nuance. And again, I think this is where the focus was on action management rather than knowledge management. Yes, knowledge management crosses over to action management, depending on your definition of knowledge. But knowledge management, in my eyes, is developing your ability to do things on a daily basis to enhance your conceptual understanding of the things that you're looking into or things you're working in or anything like that. I see you reading intensely at some notes.
There may be an explosion. I'm going to center myself. How can you be successful when you beat yourself up? That right there is the entire problem. That sentence, which is probably a summary, is the fucking problem in this space.
Did I put question marks after that?
No.
That must have been Tiago's then.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
How can you be successful when you beat yourself up? We are not fucking robots. We will always, our brains are fucking wired to fuck us up. Stop it. Learn to be successful because you beat yourself up. Use it. Stop trying to change what is true. We will forever, and it's got nothing to do with ego. Yeah, don't even go there with me. Like, it's not about their context of ego, not what actual ego is, but that's beside the point. And a whole nother thing we could go down. But like,
yeah, we'll bucket that one.
Yeah, put it in the pot and come back later.
Put it in the pot of topics we don't talk about.
Behavior changes. Biggest barrier is shame.
Sorry, Bruno bucket. We have a Bruno bucket.
Yes.
We don't talk about that.
We don't talk about ego. No.
Yeah, we have a Bruno bucket. There we go. Sorry, carry on.
Illusion of safety. Oh my God, I'm just going on that. The perfection. Now, as a perfectionist, note I'm not saying recovering perfectionist. I am a perfectionist. I can't change that. It's part of who I can if I work really, really hard, but will I? No. Because I have other things I want. I'm intrigued what you say now.
I was going to say, I was going to wait and see where you went with it. Because saying you are something immediately brings in time. Like, I am a perfectionist. Are you perfectionist all the time?
No, that's true.
Exactly.
I am. Yeah, thank you. That's actually good. Oh gosh. Why try to be perfect? Feeds ego, sense of control, pushes people harder. Safety, illusion of safety. Illusion of safety? Illusion that if we don't mess up, things aren't bad. What?
Those were answers from the chat to his question.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Which he was like, oh yeah, I really like these answers.
No expansion.
I mean, I'd have to know the exact point to be able to like recall what it was for obviously acute recall and the rest of it. But the conversation was very much hey, here's a point of self-sabotage, which immediately self-sabotage brings in like perception, like what is sabotage to you, and how do you see these things? Because the 8 points that he brought up, I actually disagreed with all of them because I see them all as positives, not negatives. But again, that's interpretation of information. And then the points that were, yeah, you're just sitting and nodding. And then the points that were brought up in chat were, I think they were the people that were struggling with the thing that were bringing up the points, because the people that weren't struggling with the thing had nothing to say because they're like, what? Which is, I think, science in general. Like, obviously, this is a human bias in research and in science and sharing opinions, but if you don't have anything to add, you're not going to add anything. So the silence was ignored, but the silence also speaks. So my silence in the chat spoke that I didn't agree, and I actually found it useful. But we can't write silence, which is like one of the issues with science, science, not silence, which is one of the issues with science in general, like research, because those people that disagree, unless they say something that disagrees with the person that's making like the presentation, which is going to cause conflict, and it did, then yeah, you're going to be stuck. And I will say there was people were calling them a troll. I don't know what their name was. It was AN in the Zoom chat. But they disagreed with a lot of what was going on in a lot of the conferences, in a lot of the sessions. And they brought up really good points, but they were battered down by like everyone. Oh, you're a troll, shut up, this, that, and the other. They could have worded their points better. I'll say that. They could have worded them better, but their points were totally valid. And I think their points were actually bringing up a lot of the issues that people were struggling with. But again, this is sort of like the tribal nature. They were attacked straight away, and you're like, come on, like actually listen or read what they're saying. The person obviously was in the PKM space, because the points they were raising were critiques that a lot of people in the PKM space have about the topics that were being spoken about in the conversations. But I didn't write any of the things down, because what they were saying was, I didn't know how to write it out, because it was quite direct. It was like a direct challenge at the person. So yeah, but I just wanted to bring that up. Like, someone did have critiques of the opinions being said, and they were shut down, and I'm like, no. And that's where
I when someone challenges me, because you're very good at challenging me, and that's why the conversations that we have are so good, because you challenge my thinking, which makes me realize what I'm just actually trying to say. I find it valuable, infinitely valuable, when someone tells me I'm wrong. Now, yes, there are trolls, and sometimes people are a little bit blunter than they need to be. I have been guilty of that multiple times. But what annoys me and frustrates me about these conversations about how can you be successful when you beat yourself up and you know, self-sabotage. One of the points you said was, well, how do you know, like, what someone deems as self-sabotage or sabotaging you is not actually sabotage? It helps to drive you and move you forward. It helps you to go, that made me think about that, and cool. It's not necessarily what is one person's sabotage is one person's savior. It's like, oh my God, yes, I can get rid of that now. I can put that away, you know? I mean, the be curious thing is kind of interesting. I'm not sure. Patience with self go. So sorry, I'm firing off in multiple directions. Patience with self, go easy on yourself. And then if you scroll up and it's like, make sure you get everything done. Just force yourself, make self. And this is the thing, this is the problem. It's like, you say one thing and then you say the exact opposite. Now paradoxes exist and they are not easy to sell, but it's like, just go easy on yourself. Less self-conflict. I'm going to just minimize these, because I'm just going to keep going and getting more and more irate and annoyed.
There's your content for the rest of the year.
Pretty much, yeah. How to overcome information overload. You don't.
Yeah, basically.
You don't. You can't overcome it. You can't go over an overload. That's not possible. Our brains have, depending on what you believe, blah, 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 context, like, they have handles that you can grab hold of. They are limitations. Get over it. Accept the limitations and work with them.
Yes.
Break it down, then it will turn into smaller things. Then it means you can have, well, you don't have more things. They're the same 5 to 8 or whatever the number is that's popular right now.
I think something that they could look to do in the next summit is have more panels, because not the way they did the ADHD panel where they have a question and then you just get like each people to answer. I think for me, what will be more beneficial is have 2 individuals. Say you have August Bradley for Notion, and then you have, I don't know her name, the Evernote lady, and you have both of them talk about something, but they go backwards and forwards, and they have a discussion like this, and they have an actual conversation about how they do it, why they do it in that way, so it's not like a sides argument discussion. It's a conversation around how they do it in different systems, rather than it being a presentation. And some people were saying in Thomas Frank's presentation that it was more of a sales pitch for his template, which it could have come across like that. It did to me. But the presentations were very much a, hey, this is what I do, this is how I do things. But there was no conversation, there was no critique, there was, like you say, there was no cognitive dissonance, there was no ability to compare one to another. You had to have watched all of the presentations to be able to compare them. And I think there is more value in the ability to compare different approaches in one presentation than watching both and then having to either look at your notes of them in the last one, or try and remember the last one, or whatever's going on. But if you're trying to remember it, because memory is reconstruction of old experiences, blah, 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 that's going to be faulty. So I think moving forwards, what I would like to see in these sort of summits is, yeah, you can do the whole presentation thing. I don't find much value in the presentations, like you've seen with the notes. Most of them is just question marks, like I disagree, I disagree, I disagree. But having a conversation, whether that is having a conversation with someone from the audience, maybe, like instead of doing a Q&A, I know the Q&As on this where here's a question, can you answer the question? Yeah, great. But normally a question is one-dimensional because it's you ask a question, you get an answer, that's it. But if there's a follow-up question or there's a bit of clarification needed, the Zoom didn't allow that, which is where I think having a conversation, a panel of conversation somewhere at some point would have been useful. Maybe just like, I mean, that's what breakout rooms are for. Maybe just a session or a half-hour session after the main interview of a couple of people just talking to the person that did the presentation about points. Maybe just getting some clarity, getting some context, getting some nuance, or challenging them on their thinking. Because I hope anyway, they are open to new ideas.
Yeah, that's pretty much what building a second brain is. That's probably why they want you to pay for it. It feels like nuance is locked behind the paywall.
I don't want it to be.
No, with what I do, I try to avoid that as much as possible because it's the actual bit that matters. Like, sure, I can hyperspiel all of Atomic Habits at you, 90-day work weeks, 4-day work weeks, 168-day work weeks, all of the work weeks. But the context is what actually makes things work. Your personal context, the environment that you're in, the experiences that you have, your prior knowledge, all come into play when it comes to building a second brain.
Now, this is going to go in a slightly obscure direction, but I'm curious because we're on the conversation. I'm curious. You mentioned prior knowledge. Now, this is part of my PhD, so I don't want to contribute too much to this. But what do you see as prior knowledge? In your mind, what is prior knowledge?
Prior knowledge to me is a word that Danny uses a lot, so I'm using it now, Jackie.
I want to sound smart.
I want to sound clever. Make me sound clever. No, prior knowledge is prior experiences, things that have happened in the past that kind of make up my kind of perspective now.
So would you say prior knowledge is memory?
Oh, I don't like that, but yes, sort of. It's not, I think that's not enough. Memory is not enough because memory is limited.
Which is why I asked. I can see the cogs turning. Because the reason I asked.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, the reason I asked is because a lot of us a lot of us think, oh yeah, prior knowledge, or information I already knew, or facts you already have, or things from school. But if prior knowledge is in some way memories, and we know memories are reconstructions of prior experiences, which are tainted by the experience we have, by experiences we have after a post event, then our prior knowledge is actually not trustworthy. Which means if our prior knowledge isn't trustworthy, how can we build upon that knowledge? How can we build upon conceptual change, understanding, and moving forwards?
Is that a question?
Yeah. How can we build upon prior knowledge if our prior knowledge isn't necessarily trustworthy if it is memories?
How do I do it? Is constant critique and constant questioning and asking questions about what I'm thinking, and like not just assuming everything that I say is right. In fact, assuming everything I'm saying is wrong. And that is not a self-sabotage and I'm just a piece of shit. It's no, it's high chance that all of the things that I think are true are not actually true. What is truth? Let's go back to the first episode. Yay. Yeah.
And yeah, so you've gone sort of like in a round circle, which is what I wanted you to do. I was kind of like, please. But that obviously comes back to, like you say, self-sabotage, but also the critique of conversation.
Yeah.
Like, the prior knowledge of the presentation is obviously going to be tainted by their own experiences, and our interpretations of the presentation again is going to be tainted by our prior knowledge, prior experiences. So in order to move forwards with the knowledge, we need to be able to critique our own perceptions, their perceptions, and discuss between us how we do that. And the only way to do that is through a conversation of discussing the conflicts or the different I wouldn't say disagreements, just differences.
And also, if in any small, tiny freaking thing that any of the people who were on this actually watch and want to discuss what we're saying, we are totally game for that, because I think it would be really valuable. I would love to hear your contexts, like where you come from, your critiques of our critiques, because that's actually interesting. I think so. If for any chance anyone who did do that, you know, building a second brain thing and want to actually have a discussion with us, you know, go for it, because we're not right.
I think that's something that is not done enough. Like there are a couple of podcasts. So the Origin podcast is one that I quite enjoy because he brings on people that he disagrees with. He actively looks for people that have different opinions, and he's like, I don't know whether you're familiar with what's his name, the change my mind person, the politics stuff. It's kind of like that sort of concept where he brings people on and he's like, okay, you have this opinion, I have a different opinion, change my mind, why are you right, why am I wrong? And they have a discussion about it on the podcast, and it's a really interesting conversation. Most of the time they stick with their opinions because of their prior knowledge and their prior beliefs, but it's a conversation about both sides, and you can see both sides having to question why they believe what it is that they believe. And seeking out those conversations is what's beneficial. That is how we move things forwards, rather than having conversations with people you already agree with, because you basically just go, yes, I agree. Yes, I agree. Yeah, that's great. That's great. That's cool. Great. Yeah,
I agree.
finish conversation.
I agree.
So obviously you're going to agree on some things, but we do also disagree on other things. Which is where I think the value comes from, the disagreement. The what's the word? It begins with a D. Dissonance, cognitive dissonance. There we go.
Yeah, the dissonance provides just that little bit of intrigue, and that, oh, that's kind of cool. What can I do with that? It like when you ask what is prior knowledge, oh shit. And I find that interesting. I think that's what needs to happen more for you to, and the whole thing that my whole spiel around starting from you is around working with your own cognitive dissonances. I don't think I like that quite too much. Like your own dissonances against yourself, the things that you see as bad and why you see them as bad, and how to use them and work with your quirks when the world is telling you just to be this.
I would probably say you're thinking more about the framing of your concepts. Like
yes. Yeah.
Rather than the dissonance, because dissonance is typically negative, or it's perceived as negative. It can have a positive outcome, but you're looking at both. So the framing or direction potentially of the concepts that you attach to yourself.
I actually don't see dissonance as bad. That's probably where my prior experience comes from, because in music, jazz music, dissonance, it adds a little bit of spice and makes things more interesting and grabs the listener's attention, which is exactly the point.
Yes, it is. I've had fun talking about this Building a Second Brain Summit, and I would highly suggest, if you've listened to this podcast, listen to a couple of the episodes. I'd probably say listen to Tiago's one, the first one, because that's where the majority of the interesting conversational starters are. Let's put it that way.
Good. What beautiful.
Right. So have a lovely day, and we'll see you guys. Well, listen next week.
We'll see too, because the video exists too. So.
Good get out.
You're welcome.